Hi, Ken here. Welcome back to Martial Art Madness. I thought I'd do a Q&A. Actually, it was at the suggestion of my wife. And because I get questions sometimes in email, sometimes on the YouTube, and then sometimes just in person, people who know me or meet me, or if I've given a seminar. And she thought, why don't you do Q&A? That's where you're probably at best. I'm often stiff. I have a couple other channels, and I'm often pretty stiff when I talk to the camera, and I think I'm kind of stiff even when I talk here. But she says, and other people says, yeah, but when you do seminars, I mean, it's fun. It's great. So I thought I'd do a Q&A and let's see how it turns out. So the first question that I get often the most is, what is my favorite type of sports martial arts competition? And I'd like to just briefly go through the majority of them and then give you my favorites. So one is kind of the American point fighting. And that's where you have all the safety equipment, the head, and you fight for points, and you could have got you, but usually in the black belt division you do make more contact. Uh, but it's not my favorite. Of course, that's what I started off with when I started martial arts in the late 1970s. I started out in Tun Soo Do, and I did okay. People think actually when they meet me and they see me give a seminar or they see me work out, that's probably what I was really good at, because I kind of modeled myself off this guy here, Bill Wallace, and they think, well, you're fast and that's probably what you're really great at. How is point fighting? And I say, no, it's not my favorite, and I wasn't really good at it. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but I wasn't good at it. I never took first place. I took second place a couple times at some tournaments. And I've tried to analyze why. Not too sure, actually. It wasn't me. And I like to make this analogy when it comes to motorcycles. When you get on a motorcycle, what is you? What feels like you? So what's the best bike? The one that makes you feel like your personality's on it. That's you. That's what you really can wrap your mind around. And for me, point fighting really wasn't me. Even when I was first starting off, I remember my first tournament, I was a white belt. I'd been Tun Soo Do maybe 2-3 months tops, and I did okay. Won a couple, lost one, and was eliminated. Actually, it was a double elimination tournament. I think I was 13 and won a couple, then lost a couple more, and I was out. But it just didn't grab me. It didn't get me excited. And so the American point fighting type sport just doesn't do much for me. We'll go to tournaments and watch it, and I've taken my students to it when I've had schools and had them participate, because I think participating and seeing other things is good, and it's good even to go watch and network and volunteer to referee. But it's not my favorite either to watch or to participate in. Now, when I was younger, they didn't have this continuing sparring, and they do have continuing sparring going on now. I think that started in the 90s. I've never done it. That I think I would have liked much more than the point fighting system. I've gone to a couple of those tournaments where they've had that at the end. They usually have the point fighting and the continuous sparring, and I think I would have enjoyed that more. But I don't know if I would have really fell in love with it. So that's kind of what I think about that. Do I have any favorite fighters from the point fighting system? Well, not that I actually saw, but if you go historically speaking, I have to go Chuck Norris, right? He was a 6-time world middleweight champion, and from all respects, just a super guy. He carried himself well in the sport as well as afterwards. And you read about these legends, or you hear about how he used to perform and how good he really was. You can see videos of Don the Dragon Wilson. We'll talk about that. I remember having dinner with Don the Dragon Wilson one time, and he said he was just outstanding. Bill Wallace, who's here, has told me some stories about Chuck and how good he really was back then in the point fighting system. And so it'd have to be probably Chuck Norris. After that, it'd probably be Joe Louis when I go by reading about it. And then after that, it'd probably be Bill Wallace. The next one I want to talk about then is American kickboxing rules, especially that was in the PKA in the early days. You don't see American kickboxing rules that much anymore. And I think it's kind of sad. I liked American kickboxing a lot. And there, Bill Wallace is by far my favorite, by far. And I did some American kickboxing. I kickboxed a total of 14 times. The American kickboxing rules was about 9 of those times. And so I did about, what was that, 4 or 5 fights with international rules. And not that I was a big star. It wasn't that. I think the most ever was any of my fights was maybe 100 people. And the most ever made was $500. I was full time in the Air Force, and I'd commit and do the best I could. 113, 0 losses, and 1 draw. And I really liked American kickboxing. It was really me. And I don't have an original thought in my mind. But in the American kickboxing scene, I did a lot of what Bill Wallace does. I modeled myself in the way my timing worked, punches and kicks, much like his. So when I was younger and without any injuries yet, I could throw my roundhouse side kick and hook kick almost like him. People would see me and say, man, you're like a clone. No one's ever a clone. And I like using my lead jab and use my right hand as the power hook. And I had a good overhand left that I would use. Once in a while, I would switch up though and use rear leg kicks with my left leg just to throw the opponent off. I could throw a pretty good left leg roundhouse kick, and that could throw the opponent off because there's always got power there. So I had that one advantage because I didn't have a knee injury when I did kickbox in my opposite leg. So that was kind of nice, and I enjoyed it very, very much. And what I liked about the full contact nature. What's interesting, I didn't think I'd ever really liked full contact. I got into karate because I wanted to be like Bruce Lee and beat the bad guys, and I think it gave me a lot of confidence. I don't want to say I was a kid who wasn't very confident, but I think in many ways I probably wasn't. And martial arts helped with that greatly. And but I loved it. I loved American kickboxing. I loved watching it, and I couldn't wait. You know, CBS would have a sports spectacular, whatever they called it back then, and they'd have some kickboxing on. It'd be, Bill Wallace or Jeff Smith, Ross Scott. I remember watching all those people, and then ESPN came on the scene, and they had some kickboxing, and they'd add Gordon Franks and Paul Vizio and Cliff Magic Thomas and Joe Corley would do his like kick of the night, where it'd be a quick intermission where they'd show a video that he made of him kicking. And I couldn't wait to watch it. And I remember when Don the Dragon Wilson was coming up and as a contender. And I remember watching some really majestic fights. One was Bill Wallace when he fought Ray McCallum. That was a great fight. Ray brought it. Ray was primarily a point fighter, if I remember correctly, but he came in there full contact and he was bringing it. And Wallace was also schooling them with it. Hey, this is what real speed and power does for you and being in shape. But it was a great fight, and that was on the ESPN one. And I remember watching Bill Wallace's retirement fight with Robert Biggs, and I just couldn't wait to see it. I couldn't wait to see in the WKA when Benny Urquidez would fight. I was a big Benny Urquidez fan as well. So American kickboxing I really loved, and then international rules I also liked a lot. If you had in the 70s and 80s, if I had to choose to watch one, I'd watch the American kickboxing rules that made people kick higher more often and force them to because they couldn't do low kicks. And it was a matter of, hey, the people have to build some skill. Unfortunately for American kickboxing, after Wallace left, it started to go down a little bit. You did have some great fighters like Jean-Yves Thériault. I remember watching him when he beat Robert Biggs for the title after it was vacated by Bill. They had those two fight. And, I remember watching when Thériault and Rick Rufus fought in the early 90s. Watched that fight on I think it was a pay-per-view, matter of fact. And it was at one of my karate students and friends' house. Kurt Brooks is the one who got it, and we taped it. And we were like, okay, go. And I was kind of rooting for Jean-Yves because I remember watching him when I was younger. In any case, I really loved it. I loved it as a sport. But unfortunately, you had very few stars in it after Bill left that could keep it going. And you got this is just my theory, you got a lot of failed boxers who went into PKA. And, they get their 8 kicks out of the way and just start boxing. And their kicks were usually pretty worthless, in all honesty. But I think that's why people like Don the Dragon Wilson sustained a long career fighting. That's why Jean-Yves was not known as really a kicker, but his kicks were very effective. And he knew how to use them properly. And I think there's a reason why those two did well. I think it's another reason why Rick the Jet Rufus did really well, because he could do both punch and kick really, really well. So I really liked American kickboxing and enjoyed it very much. Unfortunately, it just didn't have the stiff competition and the personalities to keep it going after people like Wilson retired and Johnny's retired. And Rick the Jet Rufus went over to K1 and fought International Rules. I also loved International Rules. I loved watching Benny Urquidez fight, probably because Benny Urquidez low kick, but he also would throw some high kicks, especially a round kick. And then he did that beautiful jump spinning back kick. Just would nail people with it and put them on the ground. Loved watching it. And I also loved watching when K1 really came on the scene and was a big deal. I think that was in 94 when I saw my first K1 on pay-per-view. I was at Edwards Air Force Base when I watched it and had a couple of my karate students over and we watched that. And that was a blast to watch. And it was neat to see some of the people that either I've met on my travels or taken seminars with who were in the K1 and see how they would do. So I was a big Andy Hugh fan, unassuming guy in real life. I don't want to make it sound like I knew him. I just had attended a seminar in Europe once, and he was the one giving the seminar, and I was not Kyokushin, but being Goju, and I was paid and I was allowed in, and very nice guy. I learned a lot. As I started having injuries, I kind of started modeling myself. I said I don't have an original thought. I started modeling a lot of myself kind of the way Andy did. It was natural for me to fight like that. The only thing I never really have tried those axe kicks in competition or really any type of pressure sparring in the dojo. I can throw it really well, but I've never really had that down. But I kind of modeled, and probably because, you go through one seminar, you learn a little bit and you kind of, I can model that and use that for myself. And I think it's because I was a kicker, decent puncher. I became a decent puncher, especially after training with this person here in the Philippines in the 80s. He made me a much better puncher. And so I liked the International Rules as well, and I loved K1 in the 90s and early 2000s. Absolutely loved it. I was getting worried when they started making it kind of almost like a WWE, the showman type, pitting these huge giants like Ike Bono, against Rick Rufus and Bob Sapp against so-and-so. And that kind of started, I worried that, it's going to go into this clown show. And unfortunately, it did sometimes, but sometimes it found its way back. And the competition was usually pretty good and pretty good competition. And usually had some pretty good fighters in there. And so I loved K1, and I love going to live kickboxing matches, whether it is American Rules or International Rules. The last American Rules kickboxing fight I'd gone to was actually in 1999. I want to say it was May of 99, and it was Dennis Alexio. It was in Hawaii at the Blaisdell Arena, and it was Dennis Alexio. And I went with a colleague of mine and also had been a student. He and his wife and I had gone to it. It was, I think I went to like 4 or 5 of the Alexio fights when I went there. And for the most part, I loved watching all the fights up to that one. And Alexio was fun to watch, but the competition he had was not very stiff. It was not very stiff competition. I don't know how it was selected, but when he fought an old Anthony Elmore, it really showed. And that's kind of problematic. You want some good competition. But that was the last time I saw an American Rules kickboxing match live, in person. I don't know when the last time I saw one on TV, though. Probably soon after that. And then the International Rules, I would go there all the time, especially in Hawaii or when I was overseas. I loved going to International Rules kickboxing as well. I preferred, like WKA or International Rules kickboxing over Muay Thai. And I'll tell you why, because the variety of the fighters and the variety of kicks was more. In Muay Thai, they do that, that's teep kick. It's kind of like a front kick, and a lot of roundhouses, and their hands are up here, a lot of elbows, and I like that. But the boxing is really less to be desired. But I enjoy it, and they're really tough people, man, much tougher than I am. So out of the kickboxing type range, it would be American kickboxing would have been my favorite, with a real close second with International Rules, and then a close third, Muay Thai. I did like it, but that would be how that came out. The next I'm going to talk about is the Olympic kickboxing point rules, and that doesn't really do much for me. I remember seeing the first one. It used to be AAU, and then it shifted into more of the Olympic kickboxing rules, and that just has not really done much for me. I went to some live ones, and it's okay. Knockdown karate, full contact karate, no pads, no gloves. Kyokushin world tournaments, regional tournaments, state tournaments, national tournaments, what do you want to call them? Sabaki challenge. The old Shidokan of the 90s and early 2000s, absolutely loved them. I wish that didn't stop. Absolutely loved it. That was just great stuff. Their Ironman type tournament, I think it was 2 or 3 rounds bare knuckle, then 2 or 3 rounds with gloves on, and then they went into grappling after the 2000s, I believe, and got to go to a couple events and watch them up in Chicago. And it was just, wow. I was like, whoa, boy, if I had been younger and could have committed to something like that, that would have been great. Absolutely loved it, and they had some really great fighters, and loved the perseverance and the skill. What I also love about full contact, I've been to some Sabaki Challenge to watch those, and some Kyokushin tournaments. I was very, very fortunate that I got to participate in some full contact tournaments overseas. Okinawa used to have some. I was in the military. You get a permissive TDY and go there and get on a hop. And it, I did okay. I never lost right off the bat, and so I'd make it a little while. There, they didn't have Kyokushin people fight. It's like, I don't know if it was a thing with the styles, but they did have people from many different styles they're fighting. And I was a Goju guy at the time, and would go there and fight and give it my best, and had a great time. These 2 teeth are fake. Mouthpiece only does so much. But in any case, great time, learned a lot, and enjoyed it. And got a picture here. I'll put it right here. This was my last competition. It was in November 1998 is when I had this last fight. And I got my rib busted up pretty good in it. A couple of my students went with me, and Mike and Tom. And I hadn't fought in 5 years. I was teaching at the base, so I'm teaching the base, and I'm like, oh yeah, let me go for it. Let me go. I was actually asked if I want to be a referee there before I had gone. I said, no, I want to fight. So I got beat up. But that's what happens when you're not training to fight and you go 5 years. And they're younger, faster. I was 35 at the time. So, that was great. Pretty awesome. Yeah. I had to go to the hospital 5 days later because the spasms were so bad. And the doctors told me, hey, we can give you pain medicine. That's it. We can't even give you muscle relaxation. We want the spasms to get that bone back in place. So just got to laugh at it. It's what happens if you don't train and you're going up against top level competition and you have not prepared yourself properly. But I still had a great time and got a big hug from my opponent there, George. And it was fun. And now I want to get into MMA. I have a love-hate relationship with MMA. I love watching the early UFCs and the UFCs now. The fighters now are much better than before. My Goju instructor, Dan Hecht, wanted me to get into MMA in the early 90s. He was training me at the time. And I had wrestled a little bit in junior high, but I was not a good enough wrestler. But I went to some wrestling seminars, and I was real committed to my martial art career as an instructor and into the kickboxing that I was doing, as well as trying to get my education. For I wanted to teach at a college for some reason when I got out, so I wanted to make sure I had those degrees ready to go. And I was really focused on my martial art career. I want to make sure I had secured my family. So I thought, if I get into that, I'm really going to have to train hard, especially I have to learn to beat someone like a Royce Gracie, who in the early ones was just dismantling people. And a lot bigger guys, and I was 160. I was 160, 165. But Dan, my Goju instructor, was like, come on, Ken, you can do it. Let's train you. I think I'd be more punch drunk than I already am if I did that. But I loved it. I did think that the people and their techniques and were really lacking, except for a few people in those early days. And I think it's why the grapplers did so well, as I think a lot of the strikers, which I think it bears out, were not properly trained to handle grapplers. Not that all strikers were. I mean, a lot of strikers can, and they could even then, but not the ones entering that competition. And they weren't even the best at what they did in the art. And I think that's why when Maurice Smith gets in there and defeats Mark Coleman, we see, if you learn a little bit how what to do on the ground, how to defend yourself, you can you can equalize the grappler's game and then take him out with your strikes. And we see that. What I love about MMA is that transition became more of a professional sport. And when you did that, you've gotten great strikers and grapplers, and people really kind of had to blend together. I often get asked this, what's my advice to people who want to get into MMA? And I tell them this: try to master at least one martial art. And when I say that, I don't mean just Eastern or Western martial art. Try to master wrestling or karate or judo or jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai or some art, boxing. Master that. And that may be 2 years for somebody. It may be 3 or 4. Get that striking down to where it's second nature. And then, or those grappling maneuvers. And then cross-train. My firm belief is, and I think it kind of bears it out right now, is that if you try to cross-train at the beginning, you'll get a couple techniques down right. And you'll get some things done right. And you have a lot of talent and a lot of hard work. You'll go far. But the people who generally end up at number one, being a champion or the number one contender, are generally speaking people who did that. They took 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, and they got to, for lack of a better word, a black belt level. And I mean a lot of black belts, unfortunately, as pictured here, it's not that hard to get a black belt. But in the real sense of what it should mean, I think that if you get to that level, then that's what you're better off doing, because then I think everything else comes much easier. Most of us, hopefully, will never be in a conflict. Now, I've been in some because of my job in the Air Force, and then when I had a part-time security gig that I was working in the evenings, I was a college professor, and that bored me, and worked a part-time security gig. I just watched a fight there on Paramount. I'm glad UFC's on Paramount. Wasn't going to get Paramount, but for that, I'm getting it. And so I get to watch one on Prime, and UFC now on Paramount. It's just great. But I don't watch the prelim, the stuff leading up to it for the days, and the trash talk does nothing for me, nothing at all. Well, anyways, that tells you a little bit about what I like and what I do, and I'll probably do more of these Q&As once in a while and see how it goes. Anyways, if I rambled too long and I already lost you, I understand. All right, thank you so much. Wuss.